Hello, everybody. I'm Father Christopher Tiano. I'm the pastor of St. Paul VI Parish in Hamden, Connecticut. St. Paul VI Parish is a community of believers in Jesus Christ who are united in our commitment and loving service to worship, evangelize, and give. We welcome all people to be part of our vision to be a light in the darkness. And this is our Light in the Darkness podcast. Video cast. It's kind of fun. And with me today, I have a parishioner of ours, Brendan Shanahan. And Brendan is an associate research scholar at Yale and a lecturer in the history department. And you have a specialty of U.S. and Canadian history.
I do.
Fascinated by Canadian history. I'm a big Candophile.
Candophile?
Yeah, I think that's what I am.
Yeah.
Brendan studied undergraduate at McGill in Montreal.
I did.
Which is a beautiful, you met your bride?
I did.
At McGill University.
Got
married at McGill University.
Newman Center. Yeah.
Newman Center. So it's a great thing. But we're doing these saint video casts, talk about how saints light the way for us. And this week we're talking about the North American martyrs and Saint Kateri Tekakwitha.
Mm-hmm.
But so tell me something about the North American martyrs, the introduction.
Sure. So thank you, Father Tiano, for this introduction. It's a pleasure. And as you were saying, I teach U.S. Canadian history, and this is an area that I learned about as an undergrad at McGill. And one that has proven to be a major marker in many different histories, both in how the saints have been remembered, their canonization, and different national community memories. So specifically, these individuals, 8 of them, were Jesuit missionaries in what was then New France. These are individuals who came from France as part of the early decades of French colonization in North America, largely based around Quebec. And these were missionaries who went out further afield from the main settlements to evangelize. Many had been doing so in the community among the Wendat peoples, also known as the Huron. And these individuals who were later canonized are particularly remembered for their encounters with attempts to evangelize and deaths in contact with the Haudenosaunee people, also remembered as the Iroquois, in the mid-1600s.
Right. So it's kind of interesting to us because it's hard to look back at the history of the United States, the history of Canada, the history of colonization, because it wasn't just people coming to the Americas, it was that there were already people here.
Right.
And for well or for woe, that's where the controversy comes in. That what was the purpose? And you would talk to some of our religious leaders of the time, and they certainly had this sense of we have people that we never heard of before. We want to introduce them to Jesus, which is what we do, right? What we're supposed to do. But sometimes that had a violent bent in both directions.
Correct. Indeed. One of the best ways, I think, to understand this comes from a colleague of mine in the history department. Some of you watching might be familiar with him through Ken Burns' recent series on the American Revolution, Ned Blackhawk, who really centers what is, broadly speaking, the native Northeast as a contest of empires of which native peoples are as such. So you've got the Wendat peoples, and often better remembered as better known to the public as a Huron, and then a Haudenosaunee Confederacy, largely upstate New York and in it was parts of southern Ontario, Quebec, and encountering the English. Right, this is Puritan settlement in Boston, the French in what is today kind of along the St. Lawrence Valley in Quebec, and New Amsterdam. All right, the Dutch. This is before New York was New York. This is New Amsterdam, and the different religious visions and attempts at from indigenous communities defending their territory and sovereignty. So the French missionaries who are later martyred. A book that I read in preparation for this interview by Emma Anderson really stresses that the ways in which these individuals died runs the gamut, actually, of different encounters with the Iroquois people. Two are more or less killed as non-combatants in a field of battle. This would be considered a battle. A few others are killed after capture, which is not uncommon for the time. And then a few others, probably the best remembered individual, Father Jean de Brébeuf, was killed after ritualistic torture and a very long ordeal, also as part of a process that was common in that particular time. So these 8 French missionaries in New France were out from their perspective, spreading the gospel and evangelizing to a people with whom their own group were not allied.
Right.
The Iroquois, particularly Mohawk community, at a time of often ongoing or on and off periods of warfare, which was not just French and Haudenosaunee people, but also Huron, and sometimes New Amsterdam, New England, in a very, very tumultuous time.
Well, we're talking about the 1600s. We're
Yep.
talking about the 17th century. We're talking about not that long within perhaps a century and a half of the Protestant Reformation in Europe. We're talking about the era of religious wars across Europe.
Correct.
And part of what happened was the era of religious wars. And as always, people get caught up in it. And the martyrs are the ones who gave of their life. I mean, we had great successes. I mean, certainly Blessed Saint Kateri Tekakwitha, an Indian native woman who embraced
who comes
the faith.
from that community, a Mohawk woman,
right?
Yeah, who converts after the period of shortly after the period of martyrs. In one case, coming from the same exact place of one of those martyrs.
But I think that illustrates something about martyrdom in general. I mean, if you look at the history of the church, we see the Japanese martyrs, we see the Korean martyrs, we see martyrs on the continent of Africa, we see the martyrs in Eastern Europe who were not the ones who were in charge. They were priests, they were religious, they were lay catechists, they were people bringing the faith. And even though whatever happened on a wider schema, that their blood nurtured a church. I mean, the what I always appreciate about the province of Quebec is that its founders are all religious. The Margaret de Youville. Now, if I had done my research right before, I would have remembered all the names. But you look at the cathedral in Montreal, and on the facade are all these great saints who were the founders of the city. We have Blessed Andre Bessette, who's much later, Saint Andre Bessette. But I mean, the Catholicity came from these martyrs, as challenging as it was. And bad things happened, but good things happened as well. You know?
Oh, I would say that the union of church and state in Quebec history, going back to especially colonial times, but continuing after, is indeed a central subject and part of Canadian history, Quebec history, and its relation to the United States. I think one of the examples that in preparing for our conversation, I read a book by Emma Anderson about the different memories and perspectives on the Martyrs, Indigenous, Quebec, Quebec-based, American, over both in these locations and then over time. And I think one of the things that she stresses very well in that book, and I'd recommend it, along with a book by a historian at Notre Dame about the process of canonization in American Catholic history, A Saint of Our Own, which contextualizes this story among many others, is the way in which the missionaries, the eight we remember as martyrs, embraced that risk and indeed knew that this was not just possible, but prepared themselves for what it might entail. Indeed, one survived capture, escape negotiation, went back to France, and felt drawn and committed to come back.
That was
Jokes, yeah. And I think one of the challenges we get into it, and again, as a historian, I feel compelled to bring it up, is you mentioned that these aren't these individual missionaries are not the commanders of the Quebec administrative state, and they're certainly not the King of France.
Right.
What happens over time is that after Quebec falls to the British, and even before then, but especially after Quebec falls to the British and is incorporated as this part of what becomes Canada, the leadership of Quebec and then other voices try to use the memory of the North American martyrs as a rationale for things like Indian and First Nations boarding schools, saying, this is because of the martyrdom of these individuals, we can and have the responsibility of forcibly yanking children out of their homes, quite literally, and putting them in these schools. And the reason why I mention this is because Pope Francis went to Canada a couple of years ago, shortly before his death, and made a pilgrimage of atonement, and asked us as Catholics not just to recognize that, but to foreground it as part of a process of reconciliation, and to grow our faith and as a commitment to one another. So I just wanted to perhaps inartfully stress that.
I think it's good to discuss this, and it's good to know this.
Yeah.
And I think one of the good things is we live in a time where there's great resources available for us. Forum.org has resources available. There's a podcast on Kateri Tekakwitha, but there's also much to read about the North American martyrs. I went to Canada as a 15-year-old as an exchange scout, and I remember bringing up the North American martyrs, and they said, "No, Chris, they're the Canadian martyrs."
That's what
it's all a matter of perspective.
That's what this book is very good at describing.
It's all a matter of perspective. But whatever we call them, they had a responsibility to bring the faith to an inhospitable world. And that's our responsibility today, to bring the faith to a world that may be dark, and to shine that light. And certainly our late pontiff led the way of embracing what was a difficult and challenging task, and showing us that even the light of Christ years later can make it better. So you and I are called to be a light.
Indeed.
A light in the darkness.
That's right.
We're going to discuss more of this. We should have
Absolutely.
maybe in the fall we'll have a seminar on this.
Please do.
It's very good. Thank you for being with us today. A little bit heavier than usual, but go out and be a light in the darkness.
Thank you, Father Tino.
Thank you.